So I'm just going to quickly set up my screen so I can see you all lovely faces. And again, encourage you all to turn your video camera on. It's always nice to see the smiles, the faces, the gestures. So if you are able to, then please do so. It'll be amazing to see you all. So what are we going to do today? That's the question. So what we wanted to share today in collaboration with Farahana is, how do we bring about practices of mindfulness within the Agile environment that many of us find ourselves working in? Now, we say Agile environment, but really it doesn't matter whether it's an Agile environment, but it's more about bringing it to the business world, the corporate world, to our everyday, in terms of the time we spent at work, how we interact with our colleagues, and so on and so forth. But really, to cement this point in, I would like to share an experiential and an interactive journey of 2 experiments that I conducted, funny enough, at RS Components a few years back when I was with them. And so some of you that are from there or are there now, you may have already known of some of these things that have happened whilst I was there. And it was an Agile environment. You know, we were trying to transform the organization to work in an Agile way. But more importantly, the focus here is more about what's the impact of doing both formal and informal mindfulness practices on productivity and focus. So really, that's what we want to do. So maybe just as a quick introduction, mindfulness. What is mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is a natural capacity that is present within all of us to some extent. And it involves basically paying purposeful, intentional attention to our daily experiences. And the idea behind this is when mindfulness becomes a shared social practice in an organization, and it permeates all the routines, processes, and practices between the teams, the people we work with, then the organization as a whole becomes much more resilient and performs much more sustainably. So for those of you that are familiar with the Agile principles, you'll have heard the word sustainable working quite a lot. What does that mean and how does that hook up into Agile and mindfulness practices is something that we will explore today. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off and move on to the next slide and just share with you the experience for today. Now, I call it the experience because that's exactly what this is. Rather than call it an agenda for today, I would like to have it become an experience for you as we go along through this journey. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a moment and gift ourselves with the power of stillness. And Farahana will lead us through that. Following that, we're going to do a very brief audience interaction. We're going to go into the specifics of mindfulness. And then we're going to hook together both Agile and mindfulness together by sharing the experiment on mindfulness that I did at RS. And then Farahana will walk us through a lovely guided meditation or a guided visualization. And again, interact with yourselves in terms of your inputs. And then I will share 5 of the key mindful assertions in Agile that link very, very strongly to the practices of mindfulness. And then just before we end, I will share a further experiment that I did that actually helped a team that I worked with ground themselves using the concept of gratitude. And finally, should time allow, Farahana will take us through yet another guided meditation, which will be a free flow approach. And it's going to be live and it's going to be guided as well. Hopefully time will allow. So let's get through it. Farahana, over to you.
Okay, I just want to double check. Is there a lot of background noise coming from my end? There is. Okay, there's.
I don't know if it's your end. It might be Mohammed. It was either of you two, but maybe Mohammed.
Is it? Does it sound like a hum? Okay, because I am alone in this room, but there is a refrigerator, so I'm hoping that's not picking up. However,
it comes and goes, so I'm not sure.
Oh, that's strange.
It's not continuous.
Okay, so let's use that as part of life situations that are uncontrollable and become mindful that there are sounds coming. And let's bring to this practice what we know mindfulness to be is the curiosity, the observation, and the awareness. So what I'll do is I'm going to invite all of you to, I'm assuming you're sitting on chairs, Please go ahead and uncross your legs. If you were doing what I was doing, my legs were crossed. Now I've uncrossed them and have them rested gently on the ground. And then if you're slouching, I just encourage you to lift your posture so that you're in upright position. I like to tell the children that I coach, we're going to make our bodies feel as tall as a tree. So the spine is tall and upright. Go ahead and rest your hands on your lap. Take a deep breath in through your nose for me, please. Release out through your mouth. And as you do that, bring your eyes to a gentle close. We're going to spend just a few moments here in stillness. You may notice awareness of sounds around you. You may perhaps notice sensations in the physical body. You may notice thoughts in the mind. But without judgment, allow yourself to just be with the experience as it unfolds in this present moment. And as you notice any distractions, bring awareness to it. And then slowly let go by bringing your attention on purpose to your breath. Allow yourself to focus on the flow of your breath in this moment. Notice your breath is flowing automatically without any effort or intervention from yourself. This is what we refer to as the natural automatic breath. And then invite an intentional, purposeful, deep inhale through your nose. Exhale slowly and deeply out through the mouth. And then whenever you're ready, you can slowly begin to open your eyes. I want to highlight these three words, which you will hear repeatedly during the course of this presentation, either by myself or even by Mohammed. But we want to keep these kind of on the radar: curiosity, observation, and awareness. The real crux and the premise of mindfulness: receiving the present moment with curiosity, with observation, and with awareness. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So we know that when you broke out into the group discussion in the breakout rooms, we posed a question to you all, and we asked, who has come across mindfulness before? We want to know who's dabbled into it, begun perhaps even a regular practice, or done something with it. And just want you to share. Russell, I see your hand up. Okay, thank you. Russell, can you share in what capacity you've kind of dabbled into mindfulness?
Yeah, it's been about being in the present. I've been doing a lot of walking over the summer. I think Tom's a little bit aware of one of the things that's gone on with me. And it was about making sure that I felt the leaves under the grass underneath me, the trees around me, rather than worried about so-and-so far away and what was going on, being around that one thing. So like we're in the garden and it's sunny and it's hot and you've got no shoes on. Just feel the grass and the ground underneath you and just worry about what's there and then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely does. Mindful walking is what we call it, just bringing the awareness, spending some time outside in nature, but really becoming aware, bringing the five senses alive. So when you talk about walking with your with no shoes on and you're really feeling the grass, is just, what does that contact feel like? The physical contact, is it soft? Is it hard? We can practice mindfulness when we're eating as well, but really engaging the five senses on purpose. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Russell, thanks for sharing. And I'm really glad that you've started the practice for yourself. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, we've got Kay as well. He's got his hand up.
Okay, Kate.
Oh, hi, if I may. It's funny you said the 5 senses. That's exactly what I was going to say. I'm kind of going through each day in a more mindful manner. So it could even be the most boring remedial tasks. Simply say doing the washing up and doing that in a more mindful manner. So those things that I don't enjoy so much, if I'm more mindful, it's not as boring, and I kind of feel more productive in terms of work as well. When I don't know, like you said, I'm kind of more observant in what I do, in how I feel.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I love the fact that you use the example of washing the dishes because, yeah, we don't really like to do that necessarily, but if it's something that we need to handle, how can we do that with more awareness with our 5 senses? And I'll tell you all throughout this presentation with my piece, I'm going to invite you all to connect with your inner child. I was saying this to Tom and David earlier when we just started, and with Mohammed, is I'm going to invite each and every one of you to really get in touch with your inner child. Because I'll tell you something, before we were able to even judge the experience of washing dishes when we as an adult knew that was a chore and a task, if you gave a bunch of plates and forks and spoons and dunked them all in water and gave it to a kid, I mean, they would play all day, right? And they would have fun with it, and they would mess with it, and they would feel the temperature of the water, and they would look at all the bubbles and the shapes of the bubbles in the water. What I'm going to ask you all to do is let's go ahead and have fun with the practice of mindfulness, and let the awareness not be something, oh gosh, it's another thing that I got to put on my to-do plate, because I don't want to do any of that for you all. I know you have enough on your plates already, but let's go ahead and have fun with it in our everyday life. Allow that curiosity to be a childlike curiosity. So thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. Washing dishes more mindfully. Yes. Next time you do it, check and see if there's any heart-shaped bubbles in your pool of water, okay? All right, moving right along. So as Mohammed briefly stated when he was speaking earlier, is mindfulness is the awareness of the present moment. And we want to do that as best as we can without judgment. What that means is that whatever's going on right now, sometimes we're not going to be comfortable with it. We're not going to like it. And as a result, we're going to automatically default to judgment. And so what we want to do is become aware of what's happening in this moment. And rather than absorbing the judgment, because judgment will be a default that we're trying to shift out of, but what we're going to do is we're going to become aware when judgment arises, and just be aware of that, and then shift that experience from judgment to curiosity. So write this down. If you have something to write with, make some notes. I'll try and point out some certain things that I want you all to remember, and you can take your own notes, otherwise just adding to your pages. One of the things that let's talk about is we want to try and replace judgment with curiosity, okay? Remember, judgment is going to come up. Notice, become aware. Notice judgment, become aware of judgment. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to shift now that judgment from judgment to curiosity. It is the intentional awareness of thoughts, feelings, physical sensations in the body in the present moment. So we want to spend a lot of time just observing. We got to observe first in order to then become aware. And then decide what we're going to do with what we're aware of. People have asked me in the past, well, how can you get rid of it? How do you get rid of it? And I said, you can't get rid of it until you actually first know that it's there. So the awareness is very, very important. Become aware of the thoughts in the mind, the stories. Okay. The thought, I'll give you the understanding really the difference between a thought and what is a fact. Fact is person A showed up late for a call or for a Zoom call. That's a fact. The thought about it is, oh my God, David might think I wasn't interested. Tom may think that, I think this is boring. Those are the stories. So really become aware of the thoughts, because the thoughts are what creates the stories. So you want to really pause and just stop at the fact. And when the stories start to build up, become aware of the stories that build up and bring yourself back without judgment and focus on the breath. The feelings, we're talking about the emotions. What are the emotions that build up as a result of the thoughts, of the stories? I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling irritated. Become aware of what that emotion is. And as a result of the emotions, certain physical sensations will be experienced in the body. The physiology of the body will shift. If I'm starting to feel nervous all of a sudden, I will begin to notice that the physical sensation in my body is that my heart starts beating really fast. I have rapid heartbeat, or I have fast, shallow breaths. Okay. Yes, Kay, thanks for saying that. Thoughts create our feelings, leading to our behaviors. Absolutely, you're so on point with that. So really becoming hyper aware of the entire experience, you will literally see that present moment unfold with so many different layers, and just bringing awareness to all of that. Remember, without judgment, if you begin to become aware that judgment is taking place, replace it with curiosity. Had that thought, notice my body did this, notice the emotions were here and there and everywhere. Mindfulness helps us to detach from the past. Yes. So here in the US, right, we have Pacific Standard Time, we have Central, and we have Eastern. So I'm in Central Standard Time. If I start thinking back about the past, like a time frame, I'm going to be stuck in the past about what that person did, what they should have done, how that meeting could have gone. Why was I treated that way? Why did that relationship unfold that way? I'm going to be stuck in the past. And the more I absorb the experience of the past, not observe, if I choose to absorb it, I'm going to be stuck in a lot of depression. I'm going to be stuck in a lot of sadness. The mind wants to go either into the past, or it is so tempted to jump into the future. How's that meeting going to go? What if the client doesn't like it? What if we fail to finish? What if we don't meet our deadline? The what if, which is always very often actually projecting the worst case scenario. So we feel very angst about the future. Become aware of what time frame your mind has snapped into, maybe the past or the future. Bring awareness to it. Realize the stories you're starting to create about it. And when you do that and you become aware, simply gently bring your attention back to the breath, as we did during those first few minutes, and just engage in an observation of the present moment. Any questions so far before we move on to the next slide? Again, just unmute yourself, very informal. Just go ahead and unmute yourself, or put a note in the chat box, just like Kay did. Thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk very quickly about formal versus informal mindfulness practices. Now, I promised you I don't want to give you an extra thing to do, all right? I want this to be part and parcel of how you show up in your daily living. It should become ideally just a way of you being in your everyday life. Now, when we talk about a formal practice of mindfulness, what we're talking about is, hey, we're having a Zoom call, hop on, here's the Zoom thing, it's a workshop. It might be a yoga session. It might be a meditation session you're going to go and do with your friend or your partner or your relative or whoever. It's the doing state. It's that one more thing. I was explaining this to Mohammed. You got to put it on your calendar. It's on your calendar of events. That's the formal practice. The informal practice is just showing up in your daily life, whatever it is that you're doing. You could be having a conversation with somebody on the phone. You could be washing the dishes. You could be brushing your teeth. Unless you have brushing your teeth as a calendar event, right? Which I hope you don't, right? You want to make sure that you do that act in a more mindful way. Breathing. Is everybody breathing? I like to ask my dementia patients, are y'all breathing right now? Because if you're not, we're in trouble, right? But allowing yourself to breathe more mindfully, okay? Bringing that attention to the breath. We identified the automatic breath, right? It's something that we're doing all the time. Bringing awareness to, is my breath right now fast or slow? Bringing awareness to the breath, is it deep or shallow? Okay, so the informal is the embodiment. It is going into the grocery store and becoming so irritated that the line is so long, but it's something that we all have to do, and becoming mindful in that moment. It's not a calendar event. It's just being part and parcel of how you're showing up in that lineup. And remember, the goal is, I promise, to have fun. Okay, any questions about what I mean by formal or informal practices of mindfulness?
Maybe a quick question for you, Farahana.
Yeah.
What would you say a person in the grocery store in that long lineup could do or become during that phase when they're feeling that? How could they bring about playfulness, for example, as you alluded earlier?
Feeling the angst, right? Okay, I'll give you like, I'm a storyteller, right? Because this is what I said, I engage in storytelling, real life stories. I remember going to a grocery store and the lineup was so long and I had to pick my son up, right? Because then the autopilot is, I need to be somewhere after this. I only have 5 minutes and look at how long the line is. And allowing myself to just be present and be curious, because I'm judging the line and I'm judging the cashier who's taking forever. I started engaging in conversations with the people who are front and back of me. Like, why is that person in front of me? Why is that person behind me? Oh, what is this magazine? Oh, it's actually about mindfulness. There's a reminder. Above and beyond all the madness of life, there exist certain secrets that are waiting to be unveiled. And if you want to play a game, and this is what I talk about, if you want to play a game with it, identify how you can just play, and you might be pleasantly surprised at the synchronistic events of why this situation has to slow down. My cashier, who was working at the best pace that he possibly could, I ended up engaging with him in a conversation. And I was in the middle of writing my first children's book, and it's called Doing and Being. And Doing and Being is about a young boy whose parents keep telling him doing is important, but don't forget about being. Doing, again, is the formal practice. Being is the embodiment of mindfulness in your everyday. And as I spoke to him and I needed to find an illustrator, ironically, when I said, what do you do outside of working at this grocery store? He told me that he's an artist. I was buying bread that day, just a loaf of bread, and I was in a very long line. He ends up being my children's book illustrator.
Wow.
I was buying bread and his last name is Baguette. This is a true story. This is a true story. So, childlike curiosity, bring humor in it, and I promise you, your life will change. Next slide, please. Basic tools. Okay, we talked about the breath. It's always there with us, and so are the 5 senses. But allowing ourselves to engage on purpose and pay attention. So if you decide that we're doing the formal practice, you might do, for example, a formal practice where you decide you're going to go out for a walk, and it's a moving meditation. And you go out for a walk, and just like we were told earlier, who was it that told us that? Somebody was talking. Yes. Somebody was telling, who was that?
It was Russell.
Yes. About going out for a walk and engaging the 5 senses. Look and see the colors around you. Physically touch the leaves, touch the rocks. Feel the grass under your feet. Notice, use descriptive words like hot, cold, soft, hard. Identify colors, identify sizes of things. So when you get into the formal practice, you're going to ask me, why do I need to even bother to do this? Well, the reason why you need to bother to do this is because it is helping you practice, engage on that thing that you're doing. If you're and Mohammed told me, make sure you tell them what crisscross applesauce is. Being crisscross, sitting in a meditation, and engaging the 5 senses. If you're doing a visualization meditation, for instance, and the voice in the guided meditation is telling you to walk in this field and to visualize the waterfall, engage the 5 senses. Engage them so much so that the visualization feels like you are actually there. And the only way to do that is to bring those 5 senses alive. Okay. Again, we talked about the breath, fast or slow. Also look at, the thoughts. There might be a thought that pops up in the middle of your meditation. There's a sound coming back. What if they're listening? What if that's disturbing them? Allowing myself to just be present with what is without judgment And instead of creating the stories of what if, this and that, allowing myself to notice that the thought has come up and then just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out and return back to the present moment. If I experience some kind of grief or sadness, notice that. Allow it to be. Oftentimes, we push that away because we think we're doing it wrong. I think the number one concern that people have when they're beginning a practice of mindfulness and meditation, they're like, I've got too much going on in my head. I need to be still. That is far from the truth. It will not be still until you have an awareness that is there, and then intentionally bring your attention back to the breath. Is this Greek, Latin, or are we on point so far?
I've got a question, Farahana.
Yes, Tom.
So, prior to this session, my understanding of mindfulness is all about meditation. But are we saying that the examples you've given about being in a grocery store or going out on a walk and appreciating what's around you, is meditation essential? Would you say meditation was just a way to recall some of these experiences?
Meditation is is one way that you can practice the mindfulness, because even in the meditation, the crisscross applesauce, you are bringing awareness, but you can mindfully eat as well, and you can mindfully go to the grocery store. So yes, right? But the experience within the meditation, the seated meditation, if you were just in stillness, right? A thought might come up. Now, it may be a thought about a grocery store or the girl who was looking at you at the store and how amazing it was to like engage in a conversation with that, or how bad customer service was. All of that could possibly come up. Things that have happened in that particular day. Bring awareness to the thought that comes up. Because in the stillness, all of the stuff comes up. All of the stuff that happened and all of the stuff that may happen tomorrow. But just bringing awareness to that and being able to constantly practice that a thought has come up and I'm going to re-engage the breath. A sensation in the body has come up, I'm going to re-engage the breath, right? An emotion has come up, I'm going to re-engage the breath. So while we do the automatic breathing, which is effortless, right? Engaging the intentional, purposeful breath to let go after awareness has come about, to let go of that, because we don't have to hold on to it. Remember, we're not absorbing the experience. We're simply observing the experience. We're bringing awareness to what is in this present moment without judgment, replacing that with curiosity and then bringing it back. That needs to be that constant, got distracted, brought it back into the breath. Got distracted, brought it back to the breath. Got distracted, brought it back to the breath. That continuous engagement of that practice, let that become your default. Not, oh my God, I started thinking about that. Oh my God, I think I was doing it so wrong. And I've been attending 6 weeks of mindfulness with Farahana. I should have known better. No. Become aware of the judgment and bring it back to the breath. I think somebody just said that something here. Let me just. Kay said, I feel we should allow our feelings to be and accept them as human existence, not let them disrupt us. Absolutely. Again, it's just as Kay is saying, beautifully put, Kay, bringing awareness that I'm feeling sad. Now, language is important. Tell me the difference between these two statements. I am sad versus I'm observing sadness come up. I am angry versus I'm observing anger come up. I'm going to punch that person in the face versus I'm mindfully noticing the temptation to punch that person in the face.
It feels almost as though you're putting a bit of a distance between that feeling. So I think going back to absorbing versus observing. The first one you're absorbing it, and the second one you're observing it. Would that be fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think Kay was saying something as well. Kay, do you want to go ahead?
Can I just say, is it about reacting and responding?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but you're headed in the right direction, which means I'm flattered. I feel like I'm doing a good job so far. So thank you, Kay. But absolutely, because yes, when you resist the temptation to flop into your autopilot of I am angry and using that type of terminology, because when you say I am angry, you've basically embraced the role of being angry. You're not observing it. Now, if we absorb it, what happens, Kay, is exactly what you were saying, is we're going to automatically want to react. Pow, we're going to punch. We're going to raise our voice. We're going to curse. We're going to engage into unruly behavior, which quite often after that time has passed, we realize, oh my God, I should have done that. I shouldn't have said it. But we didn't give ourselves that space to sit back and just absorb it. And all you need to do to shift from absorption to observation is literally just take a deep breath. Just like we tell children, all right, calm down, take a deep breath. I mean, parents are so good at telling their kids to take a deep breath. And guess what? When it's our turn to take a deep breath, we flop into the autopilot of absorption. Yara is saying, well, Sue first, sorry, is saying being detached from the emotion, absolutely. Detach from it, absorb it. Srivastra, butchered your name, I'm very sorry. Being witness of yourself, yes. One can change while the other is subject to change. Yes, y'all are just, you know, here's the thing. What I love about, I won't say teaching the class. I'm not teaching a class. I'm merely reminding you what you already know. And that we have kind of disconnected from the regular practice of it. That's why I'm calling mindfulness an embodiment of the practice. Remember it, and then somebody said to me the other day, Farahana, what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Knowledge is attending the class, getting all this knowledge, and wisdom is applying it to your everyday life and truly understanding and feeling, experiencing what you know. That is wisdom. Yara, one can change while other is fixed. Can you tell me more about what you mean by that, Yara? I'm going to guess. The one can change is the ability to shift from that experience because we're not absorbing it, we're observing it. So the shift from anger to feeling calm is possible. The other one is going to stay stagnant. You're going to hold on to that difficult emotion for a long, long time and be angry for a long, long time. That's not what we want to do. Okay, next slide, please. So not a problem. Okay, so your mic's not working, one is passing and the other is identifying with it. Yes, exactly. Okay, perfect. We got it. We're on the same page, everybody. Thank you. So the informal practice, you know, engaging the five senses, eating mindfully. Now, this is going to sound really bizarre, but I'll tell you in all honesty, and try this the next meal you eat. Okay. Oftentimes when we're eating, we're sitting at the computer, like the world has gone virtual. We're on a call, we're eating, we're on the call eating. We're not mindfully eating. After we finish that meal, it feels like we ate, but we really didn't like, oh, I think I need to have seconds because it just went down so fast. And then we have thirds. And so it becomes really difficult because here's the deal. When we're not mindfully eating, we're not mindfully aware, the intake of food consumption becomes very high. How many times have we just overeaten and been in a food coma? Whereas if you just take a piece of chocolate, the next time you eat a piece of chocolate, take a piece of chocolate and put it in your mouth. And before you actually put it in your mouth, take it between your hands and look at the shape and look at the size of it and look at the color of it. Engage the five senses as much as you can. You'll notice before putting it in your mouth, just the fact that the brain knows that you're holding this piece of chocolate, automatically start salivating. So what the body functions are already doing is it knows, it has that natural intelligence that something yummy is just about to come into this space. And the body starts to prepare for the entire digestive process. And then take that chocolate and put it on your tongue. I know you're going to want to bite into it so fast, but just let it sit on your tongue and watch and feel what happens in the mouth and to the saliva. You are likely to enjoy a meal much more if you eat it mindfully than do it at your laptop. So engage the five senses on purpose there.
And maybe just to add as well, if you take that one step further, mindful eating actually helps your digestive system. So one, you're not eating as much because you're very conscious with all the five senses that food is stimulating within you. And as a result, you're obviously eating less, but also the speed at which you eat affects your stomach and your gut. So try it and take away that as an experiment, as Farahana has invited you. In your next meal, just observe for the next week when you eat mindfully, what differences do you notice, and see how that goes. But maybe to indulge, I'm feeling very, I want a chocolate now, Farahana. But in your example, you're talking about, feeling the chocolate. So that's one of my senses, feeling it. And then I'm looking at that brown or dark or white chocolate. So that's engaging my eyes, is it not? And
Absolutely.
then before I put it in my mouth, maybe I can just have a quick whiff, smell it.
Yeah.
And then in your mouth. And so is that what you mean by engaging your five senses?
Absolutely.
Nice.
And you'll notice if you're holding it, it might start melting. So it gets a little gooey between the fingers and the rest of it is hard. So is it hard or soft? Right? Now, can you hear it? I mean, you won't be able to hear it like this, but I promise you, when you put it in your mouth, I used to do this with chips as a little girl and also still now. I'll put a chip in my mouth and then I block my ears and I start crunching. It's very loud in the ears. If you crunch at it immediately, it'll be very loud. If you leave it for about 5 seconds in your mouth, 10 seconds, it's not going to be as crunchy because your saliva, which is preparing for the digestion process, has made it all squishy and soft.
And just for you all to know, when Farahana says chips, she actually means crisps.
Crisps. I mean crisps. I should know this. I've lived in Kenya, so I mean crisps. You're like, chips. What kind of chips are you eating that are so crunchy? Because ours are soggy and here. But yeah, I mean crisps. Sorry. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay. Go back 1 second, please. Yes, the word triggers was used earlier, well, reactions. And so I put those right here. I want you to also notice in your informal practice, your daily triggers. When you talk about the daily triggers, a traffic jam, difficulty with a colleague at work, interaction with your manager, an unhappy customer, long grocery lines. We've talked about that. Pressures of delivery. These are daily triggers. And I don't even have to ask you, like, it's not even going to be hard for you to list your daily triggers, but become aware of them. Write them down when you get a chance. Write them down. Text from an ex is another one I like to say. Text from an ex is possibly a trigger, right? Notice what happens in your physical body when you are triggered. It's amazing. And use those physical changes in the body, the physiology, when your heart starts beating fast. If you do that, remember these words. Farahana said, when this happens to me, this is my clue. This is my pointer to practice my informal mindfulness. Don't freak out about those. Don't get reactive about it. Don't judge it, because I promise those daily triggers have to be presented to us, because I'm not with you. I'm not going to dish out a pop quiz and be like, hey, we have a pop quiz. Farahana, you didn't tell us that. Life is going to present you with amazing pop quizzes. Okay? And when you have that sweaty feeling, when your heart starts beating, when you want to punch that person, let that be your aha moment to practice your informal practice of mindfulness. All right? And thank those people and those situations for showing up so you can practice, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do it. Okay? All right.
For me, Farahana, some of my signs that I've been trying to observe when something pisses me off or troubles me, angers me, it's one, my heart starts beating. That's quite a common. The palpitations get quite high. But the other thing is my face becomes tighter, and my hands clench. And so all of these three things, depending on how often it happens and how many of them happen at the same time, I can basically look at the intensity of which that particular item has triggered me. So it could be a soft punch or it could be a harder punch. Each of them will create different reactions in me. And just for everybody's benefit as well, it is noticing these very bodily signs that can allow us to distinguish between the stimulus and the way we respond. It's about
Mhm.
creating the gap, right? So somebody has upset me, and the first thing you want to do is you want to tell them off. But if you're able to just mindfully observe that somebody has angered you, or you're getting a thought of feeling angered, you've now begun to create that gap between the stimulus that triggered you and the response that you're going to have. Ordinarily, when we're not that aware, what ends up happening is we actually react to that stimulus,
Mhm.
which means somebody does something to us and we want to punch them back verbally, physically, or even in our mind by swearing or saying certain things just internally. So it's about just observing that very, very small gap. And it is indeed very small.
So are we saying here then that what we basically want to do is reassign the autopilot reaction from a typical pre-mindful state to something that we like a to a behavior? So reassign it from behavior and trying to think how to put it. So that the behavior we would traditionally exhibit in that state, reassign it to something that's more positive.
Yeah, you want to identify your autopilot, and you want to ask yourself, is this autopilot reactive behavior that I've constantly become so accustomed to? It's like your mind identifies that trigger and knows automatically how to react to that. And what happens, and I'm not a neuroscience by any means, but the very basics of neuroscience is that you get into almost that fight or flight mode. It's like survival, right? Like you have to react right away. And what you want to do is you want to engage the part of the brain which is referred to as the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is able to look at a situation and analyze the situation, be like, I don't need to react this way right now. It's not necessary. I don't need to come from reaction. If a tiger walks through the room right now, I need to freak out and I need to run. But if a cockroach walks through the room, I will have the same reaction. And I need to remind myself that that cockroach is not the tiger. Right? Does that make sense? I have to reassign my brain another option. I need to almost like unhardwire, because with a lot of trigger situations, we've been hardwired to react a certain way. And it's not necessarily always the case that we have to react in that way. So we're trying to unhardwire, pull it out, and then decide and decipher what part needs that type of reaction versus we can hold off on this. You know, a boss might throw, oh, by the way, since you're working on this, the client has suggested da-da-da-da-da. Can you throw that in? And you're like, oh my God, another thing that, and it's like, wait a minute, ask the necessary questions. Do we have a deadline? Is this priority? When does it, what's the timeline? Rather than just immediately freaking out and saying, oh my God, are you serious? Now he wants something else to do? Well, maybe he wants something else to do, but he's saying, you know what, like 3 weeks down the road later, once you all have done this, then in 3-4 weeks, we can talk about it. But just as a heads up, because you might need that information to, you know, keep in mind that that's coming down the road, but no one's telling you to deliver that right now. And the reaction that we're giving is as if we're having to deliver it right now. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's that reassignment to the action that I was...
Yeah. We're shifting from reactive to responsive. In an everyday example, if somebody cuts us off traffic, what's our immediate reaction?
I know.
Thank you.
Get out and smack them or toot the horn.
Are you all familiar with this, flip someone the bird? Because maybe not. I mean, that's what people say here, you know, flip someone the bird, right? It's this guy right here. So, you know, or we might honk the horn really loud, or we might accelerate and then flip them the bird. Whatever the case is, you know what I'll do? I'm crazy. I will look at their license plate or their bumper sticker, because I like to look at sequences of numbers because I think numbers have meaning. And in my mind, that person has done me a favor, because if they hadn't cut me off, then the license plate would not have been drawn attention to. And I need to notice it, so I will notice it. But I'll do anything and everything to change it from being cut off the road and needing to flip them the bird to just, I mean, I've taken pictures of bumper stickers that have really good messages. My phone is a storyboard in itself. And it's humorous in that moment to see, you know, a sign, perhaps I believe in science, in numbers, or a bumper sticker, then saying that this person is a complete prick and he didn't need to cut me off, and now I'm going to cut him off. It's a choice, y'all. It's a choice, what you want to create in that moment of your experience.
Maybe
And
just
I'd
an
rather
extra
laugh
addition.
about it. I'm sorry?
David, go ahead. Do you want to say something?
I have a question. My dog has just started barking, so if it gets noisy, I'll stop.
That's fine.
So I'm totally on board with this. I think this is really good, and this is a good example. I was going to ask on the previous slide, but the car situation is a good example. If somebody cuts me up, I used to, you know, get a little bit sort of slam on the horn and things like that. Now I'm much better. But other people that I'm with are much more likely to be, go on, toot your horn. And so my question really is, if you're working or living with people who are very quick to for things to get very, very escalate to a very high level very quickly, but they're not on a kind of mindfulness journey, are there any tips you can give to helping deal with that? Because my approach of trying to calm things down doesn't generally work. So what could you give? What tips could you give to help other people who aren't on board with this journey?
I mean, I would invite them to look and consider their reactive patterns and ask them, in what shape or form does that serve them? Because at the end of the day, if they're going to end up more angst, feeling more angry, the mindset when we're angered and we are angst is not going to provide us the clarity that we're really looking for in order to be most productive, right? And so in observation of that, I mean, David, for you, with people saying, well, how are you keeping so relaxed? And you know, just imagine the universe is way tempting you, David, this side is better. Let's get angst. Let's have this complete, you know, talk about this person who showed up. Well, really, it's building that energy. It's building that, the angst and the irritation. And it's really not, Eckhart Tolle calls that feeding the pain body. You're going to have those colleagues, you're going to have those family members who want to feed the pain body. I mean, I'm try to invite yourself to see it another way. And I think the more you do that and the more you embody another perspective, they're going to start getting really curious about you. David, that meeting was so frustrating. How did you manage to keep it all together? And you just simply explain to them, I notice that when I engage and I absorb, I lack the clarity I need to make a better decision for myself and for my team.
Maybe just as a tip, David, as well, and for all of you as well, one of the things that I use is this idea of sending compassion, love, and forgiveness to that person who's cut you off in traffic or whatever it might be. You see, we as human beings have no clue what's going on in other people's worlds unless they tell us. Right? And this is all part and parcel of building trust within our team. But if you could make a legitimate excuse for them in your mind and say, hey, you know what? Maybe that person is rushing to the hospital because his wife is giving birth. Or maybe they've just had the worst possible news that none of us would want to have. And as a result, they've just cut me off and they don't give a rat's about anybody else on the road, but they just go to do what they need to do. So sometimes just sending compassion, love, and forgiveness to them. And I'll give you an example. There was one time I went to Birmingham for a meal and I left my car, my laptop, and all my valuables in there. And guess what happened when I returned from my meal? My car was broken into.
Wow.
Now, it was in the middle of, it was about 9:30 at night. I had to take a trip back to Peterborough, which is about an hour, 45 minutes. And it was in the winter and they smashed my window. Now I'm thinking, these guys have taken they've taken my laptop, they've taken my case of Vimto, they've taken my shoes, they've taken whatever else that was in there. Obviously, I called the police, let them know, put the crime reference number in, and then I sat and I thought, you know what? Whoever's robbed these things from me, I truly wish that they find good use of those items. Because something must have led them to do what they've done. No ordinary person likes to steal things unless they're in a certain position where they might have to feed their child, or they may be dying of hunger for the last 4 days, or they've been freezing right out in the winter and just want a warm place to live by selling some of the things they stole from me. Very, very quickly, my anger, my hurt, my pain, and the fact that something was taken away from me, that attachment that I had to my items, very quickly subsided. So just have a think about how you can, engender love and compassion towards those situations as well. In fact, one of the experiments that I did, which I'm going to talk about, one of the topics is about engendering love and compassion for your colleagues, because they piss us off all the time, right? They don't do things we want them to do. They don't deliver things on time, or they just aren't active enough, or they don't do what they're supposed to be doing at work and they're slacking. All of those different situations can really, really impact us.
And what you've done there, Mohammed, is exactly what we've talked about, right? Is you have replaced the judgment, because it's the judgment of any type of situation, whether it's traffic or this person's breaking into your car. Judging that creates a story, and we don't even know that as a fact, right? This person's a prick. ABC are pricks, point blank. It's that story that we've created in the mind that causes the emotional distress. It's that judgment. So when you replace the judgment with curiosity, Mohammed's saying, I wonder why he stole it. Maybe this and maybe this. And I wonder why that guy cut me off. Maybe this and maybe this. Because the worst case scenario story is what we like to build up, not necessarily like, but is the autopilot to go to. Demonizing that person or situation. And that's what creates the angst, versus having that compassion and having that curiosity will give birth to the compassion of all the various possibilities. It's amazing, right? What the mind does with all the various possibilities of why this person could, we plummet into the worst. Okay.
So we're just about to now jump into the next section, which is about trying to link this to the agile world, or the corporate world, if you like. So I'll take over from here now, Farahana, and then invite you back in. But please feel free, anyone, to chime in at any stage, just like I've been doing so far and like everybody else has. So who is actually practicing this? So besides the individuals, some of us are already doing it, some of us are on a journey towards that, and some of us are trying to learn how we can do that to better ourselves and our own daily practices. So I've come across 3 big US-based companies that actually practice this within their corporate environment. And it's actually not just something that they do on the side, but it's actually real programs that they've put in place. Guess who the first one is? Google. Google, as you know, are known for search. So they've got a program called Search Inside Yourself. Inside Yourself, right? Very aptly named, something that they started back in 2007. And they ran this program amongst many of their teams and within their environment. And the results that they reported were improved emotional intelligence and mental focus. They also reported boosting of resilience to stress, for example. We're working in this environment that's, dog eat dog. It's quite a tough place and environment to work in. We don't know what pressures we have of delivery. Our colleagues are not playing ball. Our children are not letting us do work from home. We've got dogs barking at us. How do we build that level of resilience towards these little stresses that can really build up on us? So that's Google. Then we have General Mills. They just give it a general name called mindfulness programs, but they've been offering this at their headquarters since 2006. They've reported improved employee focus, clarity, and creativity. Wow, these are some really bold claims. And then there's Intel, and they talk about this idea of awake. at Intel. It's about being conscious, paying absolute attention. Awake at Intel, a program been running since 2012. Again, reported a 2-point increase in new ideas, which is around creativity, any insights that they've got in mental clarity. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I certainly want to have an improved resilience to stress. I want to be more emotionally intelligent. My mental focus can sometimes really suffer because I'm working from home. There are distractions around. The fridge is right there. There's so many different stimulus is coming through our way, whether it's, Skype calls, or I say Skype, but you know what I mean, Microsoft Teams, or any other of these different, things that stimulate us, and we've got to try and pay attention to multiple screens. That affects our mental focus. We cannot then focus on a specific thing that we're working on, and we get distracted. But these are, for me, very, very bold claims. I'm not sure how many of you would agree to that, but that's pretty big in terms of doing that. And so for me, what ended up happening was I thought, well, if these big corporates are doing this, I became really, really curious as to how they're achieving these end results for their teams and their people. So I went from curiosity to experiment. So here's one of my first experiments. I asked myself, well, if these big corporate giants can do it, they're the ones that have massive well-being programs, they have the money to spend, they have the time to do it, they've got campuses in which people are almost there 24 hours if you take Googles, the Facebooks, and all of these things. But then I asked myself, if they can do it, why can't we? Why can't I try and do something to try and bring some of these practices? What stops us? What stops me from bringing these as experiments? And something like experiments is something that's hugely used in the Agile world. We always want to try things. If they work, we do more of it. If they don't work, we adapt and try and inspect it and do it in a different way. So not every company has such well-being programs. Not everyone necessarily actively cares for their employees. They may be investors in people, but there is no programs backing that up, right? So what did I do when I came across this sense of deep curiosity? Nothing. I did absolutely nothing, but I was very much burning with curiosity. And then I struck gold. I was having an opportunity to go and spend some time with the marketing department, where I was asked to help them form a stronger team and introduce the concepts of Agile and see how they could do marketing using Agile principles. Now, in that, there was a member of the team, her name was Akriti, and what she was doing on the side was running guided meditations. I didn't have the confidence to do that at the time, a bit like how Farahana did in the beginning. And I said to her, hey, why don't we introduce this together as an experiment? Now listen to what happened. This was the design. The design of the experiment was, well, what if we get in trouble from HR? Because we are doing something that is typically in the remit of them. Who are we to do it? Why should we do it for our team or other teams? Then there was a concern that was raised by a few people we were speaking to that said, well, this sort of stuff can really impact people because it's playing with psychology. Or is it? Can we cause harm to our attendees? That for me was not a big issue at all, because I knew for certain that mindfulness cannot cause harm. It can but only help. We were not there to offer therapy or any deep-rooted psychological challenges that people may face. We were there to experiment with something. Then came along the idea of, well, we're using company time. We're not here to do meditation or mindfulness. We are here to code or do work or deliver products, aren't we? So we designed the experiment to attack some of these beliefs that me and Akriti had and a few other people that shared some feedback with us. We said, look, let's try it as an experiment. And with many experiments, as many of you would know, we want to scope it very, very tightly because we want to know what results come out of that particular experiment. So back to the experiment then. So we restricted the scope to 30 people. And then we said, well, 30 people, what are we going to do with these 30 people? So we said, we're going to do a 4-session series over a 4-week period, and I'll show you what that looked like. And we're going to do it free of charge, and at lunchtime. What lunchtime did was it meant people voluntarily are attending a session. They're giving up their lunchtime because they think and feel that there is value in what they're going to attend. So far, we're not using company time, we're using people's lunchtime, restricted to 30 people over just 4 hours, 1 hour session each. What did we need? We needed a large room, we needed to do some advertising, and of course, we needed some willing and curious people. But then what's really important with an experiment is how do we measure whether this series that we're doing is successful? So the first thing is we're going to get feedback. We're going to ask people who attended and receive what they're going to say and potentially adapt our next session. Then in our next session, if we get a repeat attendance of greater than 25%, then we know there is something in this, because the same people that came for the first session are now beginning to come again. And the third point was, if we are asked to organize another session after these 4, then we know that those 4 sessions went down beautifully well and people feel the desire to be able to do this. So that was 3 of our key measurements. So we tried to put a risk, we tried to take that so-called risk in that experiment. And we said, okay, let's put an ad out. If we got RSVPs, then people are interested. We'll run the show. If we didn't get any RSVPs, we won't run those sessions. And that will tell us straight away people are not interested. So we are listening to our customers. Notice I'm using the principle of Agile here about listening to your customers. If we end up with a waiting list, how amazing is that? Because suddenly there are more people than we have the capacity to deal with. So we'll run another session or we'll say sorry to them, but that's all giving us the confidence that running this would do us well and people are genuinely interested. So what did the ad look like? We did the 4-session series. The first one was purely around mindfulness of breathing. The second one was about loving kindness and compassion towards our colleagues that we spend 7-8 hours a day with on a daily basis. And the third one was around acknowledging and being thankful for the good things at work. Because it's very easy for us to nitpick and point out things about our company, our colleagues, our people, and the products we work on in the negative sense, rather than acknowledging and being thankful for the fact that we get to work on that product. We get to remove that technical debt. We get to fix that code. We get to do all of these different things in order to make things better than when we found them. And then the last one was around developing skills to overcome stressful situations. Very common, very important when it comes to work, but it's all about engendering patience within yourself. So we put this out there, and our first session, are you ready? The first session looked like this. 29 people attended this particular session. Over the 4 sessions, we had an average of 23 people that attended. Now notice, Farahana talks about informal versus formal practices. This, people have taken time out, they've put it in their calendar, and they're all there sitting in not a crisscross applesauce way like Farahana described, but they were sitting on chairs with their feet nicely down, with their backs as elongated as possible, a bit like what we did in the beginning. In the front of this room was Akriti running a guided meditation for roughly 45-50 minutes, where these people sat and listened to all of those 4 practices around that. What did they say after these 4 sessions? I was calm and able to focus. Notice the word calm, notice the word focus on the tasks I had to complete, even though there was a whole bunch of things going on in the background. Maybe the bosses were shouting, or maybe there were some deliveries that were delayed. They were still able to accomplish their contributions calmly and in a focused way. Somebody came along and said, I just felt grounded and at peace. So they were able to tackle their afternoon much better than they ever would have been with all the stress and anxiety that was going on for them. And so there you go. I was much less stressed that afternoon. Then you notice people like Luke there, who looks like he's fallen asleep. Now, this tells me not only that Luke fell asleep, but actually he was able to engage his body to such a relaxed state that his mind went into deep sleep. And that's okay, because they often say that when you do mindfulness practices and meditations, 20 minutes of just meditation can rejuvenate you to up to 4 to 5 hours worth of sleep. So if you look into the details of what meditation can do for you and how it works with your brain and your chemicals within, it actually rejuvenates your body, your soul, and get you ready for the next piece of work or task that you have to do. And then obviously there was somebody at the back as well who seemed like they had fallen asleep, but that's all good. We were not there to stop people from falling asleep. We were there to try and help them experience 4 sessions of these. So that was the experiment we ran, and those were the results around that. We ran all 4 of those sessions very, very successfully, and we had demand to do a lot more sessions after that. But I then left the company. Akriti hadn't then progressed that in any other way, and it sort of just ended there. But it was acknowledged, it was seen as something that was really, really beneficial. But really what we want to do is we want to try and get these practices out there. We want to try and make them become part and parcel of our everyday work. So some of you may be working for organizations that offer yoga, well-being activities, breathing, mindfulness, exercise, all of these different things that come. You should, make good use of those, indulge in them, and see how you can add value to other colleagues and spread the love around those particular practices. So that's my first experiment. But let's now just quickly link through this to some of the things that Farahana said and some of the concepts that you guys all know around the Agile practices. We talked about doing Agile. We talked about being in the doing state when it comes to the formal practices. And we all know, for example, that doing Agile is necessary and often the first point when it comes to moving from a waterfall way of working to the Agile way of working is by introducing Scrum. And introducing Scrum brings with it things like the daily stand-ups. It brings with it sprint planning and all of those different ceremonies that many of you would be used to. But is that enough just to do those practices robotically on an autopilot? Oh, it's 9:15. Oh, we've got to stand up and do a daily. Oh, okay, it's Friday now. We've got 2 hours worth of planning. Oh my God, 2 hours worth of planning? Do I have to really sit through this, right? It's not enough to be doing Agile. So what we really want is we want to move towards being Agile. So many of you would have heard this concept of doing versus being Agile many a times. And so this being Agile is about paying that conscious attention and being absolutely intentional around the mindset in your team, in your company, in your department, in your organization. What about the culture? How is that working out? Are we intentionally trying to move our culture from state A to state B? And how is that going? Which areas are lacking? Which areas need a little bit more support? And you and I both know changing the culture of an organization is no small feat because it comes embedded from past history of how they've worked. And that comes up and shows up in the present. So those are some of the things there, but maybe 3 principles of Agile that we could just quickly hook into here. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge. They show up from self-organizing teams. Now, if you wanted to control every situation by making sure you have big upfront designs, your requirements are all spec'd out from the beginning, what you do is you lose the opportunity for emergence, for new learning, right? Look at the next one around continuous attention, right? Continuous attention to technical excellence, something that many companies struggle because they're trying to get deliveries out there. And then their technical excellence, their technical debt, for example, the lack of unit testing, the lack of all of these different things begin to creep up. So what we want to do is be absolutely attentive. So in the example where, for example, a team has to write some code and they've got to deliver it in 2-3 weeks because the customer is shouting loud and high for it, and so is your boss and so is the company because it's going to generate revenue. But at the same time, the team, in order to deliver that, are cutting out unit tests. They're cutting out or adding more technical debt and doing things in a non-quality oriented way. So one of the things we can consciously do with our managers, our bosses, and our customers is to say, hey, we can deliver this, but if we deliver this with technical debt, it's going to cause us maintenance problems later. It's going to cause us ability not to be able to inspect and adapt our code quick enough because we're just writing it to get it done so that you can have what you need. Do you feel that we could have a little bit more time because we don't like to compromise on quality? And I'm sure you don't as our customer. So how could we have those conversations more consciously, more openly, so that the demands that come from our boss that just adds more and more and more to our plate can be handled a little bit more mindfully? And then there's the simplicity aspect of it, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, right? We are very good at keeping busy. It's very easy to say, oh, I'm just going to quickly update Confluence. I'm just going to quickly do this. I'm going to just quickly do that. But is it adding value? Who is it adding value to? Are you just doing it because you have to do it? Or are you putting documentation first, which is going against sort of the core principles of Scrum? So just 3 examples there that allow us to allow that concept of emergence, continuous attention, and also keep down the amount of work we don't do in order to make sure that we have the mental capacity to do the work that we do need to do. That's a lot more mentally taxing, complex designs, complex architectures, all of that need mental space. But if we're busy doing other things, that mental space is not created. And as a result, we don't achieve the designs we want in the first place. So these are the 3 principles, but I invite you to look at the rest of the 9 in your own free time and ask yourself the question, how can we mindfully, more attentively and intentionally apply these 12 principles in the work environment? Forget Scrum, forget Kanban, forget daily stand-ups. Hook onto those 12 principles and say, how can we be more effective at these within the context of your organization? So, unfortunately, Farahana has had to leave, so we're going to skip this slide. But in this, what Farahana was going to do is walk you through a recent journey of a workshop or a meeting where something triggered you. And as a result, feel those emotions, feel those senses, and do so. I'm not going to take that because there's no way I'm going to be able to do that as well as she would. So please forgive me for skipping over this slide. Okay, so let me now share with you very quickly the 5 mindful assertions in an agile environment. Assertion number 1, sprints. For those of us that use Scrum, sprints by their very design are mindful. What do I mean by sprints being mindful? So let's have a look here. Imagine this green sprint here is our present sprint, the sprint we're currently in. Notice I've called it the present sprint, not the current sprint. It's about being present in the now. So when Scrum came along with the concept of sprints, one of the things they wanted to do is to help the team stabilize for a short period between 1 to 4 weeks so that changes don't come in or don't come in as often as they would, to give the development team some kind of stability to be able to deliver what's been demanded. And that's also what's on the highest priority of the product owner to be able to deliver. So we're in the present sprint. This is in the now, in the present moment. But guess what? We had a past sprint. What do we get from our past sprint? So this is about looking back. When Farahana talked about the past, we're looking at the past. What are we saying? Are we saying that, oh my God, that developer didn't deliver what he needed to do, so we screwed up and we couldn't get there? Or this client is such a pain, he's constantly demanding things from us, or this product owner, for example, he's got an endless list of things we want to do and always brings, new things on the board without giving us that stability? Or do we want to look at what we can learn from those experiences? And indeed, when we're looking at ending a current sprint, quite often than not, we're looking at a retrospective. And that retrospective is allowing us to look back and saying, hey, rather than blame people, what can we have learned so that we don't repeat in the present sprint the same error, the same mistake, or the same issue technically? So always remember that sprints in this particular case are mindful because we're working present, we're looking at the past. But then there's also the future to look at. The future is about forecasting. The future is about looking at what it is that we might need to do based on customer feedback, based on customer reviews, and what's the next greatest feature that they want us to deliver. Now, in my experience, I've found in the Agile world that it's very, very difficult to engage our customers during sprint reviews. I don't know how many of you find that. I don't know how many of you actually have real customers attending and feeding back what you've delivered and telling you kudos, well done for delivering that. Now we want this. You often find the product owner plays that role. The business analyst plays that role. No harm in that. But again, it's an invitation for us to think about how we can better involve our customers, because their voice is the one we want to listen to, not the voice of the product owner. We don't want to listen to the voice of the BA. We want to listen to the voice of the true customer. So at all of these stages, we are focusing on that present sprint. And the reason I've already explained, it's because we want to be in the now. What can we focus on now? So our head doesn't go in the past, nor does it go too much in the future. And we have a good balance of where we are. So sprints by design are mindful. Let's look at the second one. Responding to change is mindful. So a nice quick Dilbert for you all. Did I remember to tell you before you finished the coding that the user specification has changed? And then you get this developer going absolutely crazy, screaming away, banging his head on the keyboard, and has no clue how to deal with that change that person is bringing. So can we respond to change mindfully? That's the question that comes about here. And it's such a strong tie because at this particular stage, this developer is now frustrated. He's not mindful enough. He's bam, 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 banging his head on the table, probably broken his keyboard and so on and so forth. So let me open the floor up for just half a minute. How could we respond to the change that's been demanded of this developer mindfully? Anyone?
I guess you could notice how he's feeling. So he's obviously venting, and he's not cross with the user. It sounds like he's cross with the pointy head boss, and not telling him, but he could notice how he's feeling about his boss. Observe, and then take a deep breath.
And then take a deep breath and recenter himself. Indeed, yeah. Anyone else?
He probably needs to get into the client shoe and understand, why is it that important for him, so that he understands it from the other end.
Voila. I love that response, because that's indeed exactly what that developer can do. Because you see, at this stage, he's rejecting the fact that the spec has changed. He has not taken the time to understand why that spec has changed and what the impact is of that. So if he took a deep breath, as David said, and as you said, Deepa, that he just curiously asks that person, he's probably the product owner with the pointy-headed thing, and says, hey, tell me, why is it that important that we make that change now? Will it help us make more money? Will it satisfy our customer more? And if you want me to make that user spec change now, then there is something I may not be able to do. So now you're asking the product owner to say, okay, I'll do this, no problem, but this won't get done. Are you happy and satisfied with that? Can you see how mindful that response was? So being conscious to a change to a user story mid-sprint. I mean, it's so annoying. You've got your mind set on a specific thing that you've got to deliver. Everybody in the team has understood it, and suddenly something's changed and you've got to adapt. We want to avoid that, obviously. So the first question is, hey, product owner, pop that onto the backlog. We'll do it in the next 2 weeks. Easy peasy. If he says, no, it has to be done, then let's be aware of that priority change. You can also say, no, you can't have it, product owner. And this is the reason why. But be conscious enough to help the product owner understand exactly why you're saying no. And it's not because you're being difficult. It's not because you're being frustrated, but because you're coming from a place where you want to understand and you're saying no for very, very good reasons. Then there's a team member that falls ill. You know, it's the winter season, COVID's hitting us, people are falling ill every so often. It's impacting delivery, and suddenly another team member has to take on that work. How do you deal with that? Can it be pushed onto the backlog for another sprint and pushed over so we don't finish our commitments, but we embrace the idea that a team member fell ill? As a result, we couldn't do our commitments. It's not because we didn't want to, but there was an external influence that came and attacked our delivery plan. And naturally, we want to be able to help focus on what is the most important. And as a result, we do the things that are of highest value. So those are some little tips and tricks on assertion number 2, that we do not want to react to change. We want to respond to change. Okay, good. Assertion number 3, embracing uncertainty is mindful. I don't know about any of you, but certainly for me, this world is full of uncertainty. I have no clue whether I'm going to have a job tomorrow. I have no clue whether I'm going to be able to stand up from my desk today. I have no clue whether the weather is going to be as cold or hot today or tomorrow. I have no clue about how any of these things are going to pan out. What I do know that in this very moment, I am here, I am present, and I'm able to embrace any uncertainty that might come my way. So let's have a look at a few points here. One of the things that I found when we moved away back, 15, 20 years ago from waterfall towards the agile way of working is the waterfall fails because it doesn't take into account uncertainty and the human aspects. So they make a plan, you've got to deliver by plan. If you don't deliver, you're a bad team. We didn't actually say in the middle of those 3 months of delivery whether the customer has injected more requirements or has changed the spec. We have not accounted for any of that. So Agile, as you all very well know, came along to try and address these issues. So instead of providing certainty for 6 months of development, we said, well, at least let's try and provide certainty to some reasonable degree over a period of a sprint, whether that's 1 week or whether that's 4 weeks, depending on what you're using in your teams. But also the answers for what is going to come in the future, we don't often know. But yet in Waterfall, we are planning medium to long-term things that we're going to do, making commitments to customers that we will do this. What we don't realize is in 3 months' time, the customer no longer wants that feature, no longer wants that particular color on that button. Things are changing constantly. So our job is to be mindful of that, embrace any changes and uncertainties and adapt to them, which is exactly what Agile is. So let's respond more to any uncertainty that hits us, whether it's personally, whether it's with our family, whether it's the people on the road or the grocery shops or our bosses or our colleagues. It's all about responding rather than reacting. And as we said, we cannot predict the future. Agile is built purely on this premise that prediction of the future is very, very difficult. We can forecast it mindfully, but we have to accept that things will change. So planning is important, but the plan that comes out of it is less so. Okay. Assertion number 4, conflict resolution. Many of you may either have faced conflict in your teams, and many of you may have run away from resolving that conflict because you don't know how to handle conflict with other people, especially if they are a little bit more aggressive or they're being passive aggressive. We have no clue. But here's a question. Does mindfulness prevent conflict? and difficult issues from arising? Feel free to unmute.
I would say it won't prevent all conflict or difficult issues. No.
Okay, absolutely. So it doesn't prevent them from arising. But when they do arise, can we use mindfulness to skillfully acknowledge, observe, and respond to them? For example, imagine a team member comes along and frustrates you for some reason or another, ends up walking away from the meeting, making you feel slightly embarrassed as they've walked away from it. One thing you could do is acknowledge first that person X has walked away. That means they've been triggered. That's your first sense of awareness, observation that something has occurred. Then, one step you could take is give them some time to cool off. Again, now you're acting mindfully. Once they've cooled off, you can say, hey, remember when we had that little thing and you walked away? You think we could grab a coffee and have a chat? Now you're testing whether they're open to you, open to that conversation. Your job is then to reflect and respect that they may not be ready to speak to you as yet because they're still festering those pain points. So you could leave them with a little point to say, what? No problem. I respect that you may not be ready. When you feel ready, you know where I am. Please hit me up and I'd love to buy you a coffee. You then see what happens immediately after that is that person will calm down. He will then say, or she will then come to you and say, hey, you fancy grabbing that coffee? And boom, that's when you have now an open door to have that conversation. So this is about how we navigate through those difficult situations. Okay, now I'm going to speed up a bit because I'm very conscious of time. A quick story, the product owner versus a developer conflict. So when I was working in the Netherlands, I came across a particular team member who was finding the product owner very, very difficult to work with. Now, what she felt was the PO was very, very demanding, ungrateful, and more importantly, very, very unsupportive. The impact on her was she began to feel very demotivated. She began to feel fear when she came to work, and she felt unappreciated by the PO, and her anxiety in any interactions with that PO started increasing on a scale of 1 to 10. So she reached out to me and she said, look, there's this PO, this is what's going on. Can you please speak to the PO? Now, very easy. I'd be like, yeah, of course, I'll go and speak to the PO and say, hey, you've got this problem and this problem is affecting you in this way. And as a result, stop doing it. Easy peasy. But that's not the approach I took because that's what I would call a shortcut approach. But actually what I did do is I tried to understand more of what this developer was saying. And what I unearthed in a couple of one-to-ones before we went to the product owner was this, that firstly, she was being triggered. There were deep-rooted personal challenges that she was facing and being triggered by this PO. The PO didn't know about it, but she was being triggered. Then she didn't have the courage to address it. Now, courage, as you all know, is one of the values of Scrum. And courage is something that we need to be able to build within us, to be able to share openly, authentically, how we're feeling in the work environment and be able to openly discuss those in a safe environment. So what did I do? I explored this with her, ran a few breathing exercises together with some strong affirmations that allowed her to ground herself in her breath and build the courage that she needed to address the PO directly between herself and the product owner. She did that. And she came back to me and she said, Mohammed, I'm so happy you didn't listen to my suggestion by going to speak to the PO and you forced me and you made me understand and helped me build my courage in order to have that conversation directly. She had that conversation, and what ended up happening was, firstly, it wasn't as bad as she envisioned, right? We tend to make a mountain out of a molehill more often than not. Then the PO was actually, surprisingly to her, very, very understanding and took in on board the feedback that she was giving. He started reflecting on whether his behavior is impacting other members in the team in the same way. Isn't that amazing, right? The relationship was restored, and she now suddenly has the confidence to raise any issues openly and safely with this product owner. How cool is that, right? Now, if I had done it, it would have been easy. But no, let's try and get our team members to have direct conversations with the people that are impacting them and be open and vulnerable to be able to have those conversations. Okay, so final assertion. I'm going to run through this quickly. Communication is mindful. So back in the day, and I say back in the day when pandemic hadn't hit us, we would talk face to face. We would be in front of each other. We would have their gestures, their body languages, and all of that stuff coming through. Nowadays, we're working a little bit like this, right? Even though we see it, we don't have video on quite often. So sometimes circumstances don't allow, and so on and so forth. But here, what I'm trying to say is, when was the last time you were in a meeting? Probably today, if you were working. Did you observe who was contributing in that meeting? Contributing by voice or contributing by delivering something? What was the energy like in the room? Was it high, medium, low? Was everyone in the room? And I don't mean physically in the room or virtually in the room. I mean mentally in the room, right? Quite often I find nowadays, not everybody is in the room. They've got a lovely excuse to be working away on a laptop whilst a meeting is going on their second screen. And they're not actually quite there. In a physical environment, we create rules of meetings and you say, look, shut down the laptops, no mobile phones. It's very hard to enforce and police that in today's working environment. So ask yourself, who doesn't have their camera on? Is there an underlying reason? Maybe they don't have a camera. That's no longer an excuse because all companies are now issuing cameras. But maybe they have children running around that they don't want you to see or don't feel comfortable. Maybe they have a messy house. You don't know. Try and understand why those cameras are off and gently observe and encourage them to do so. Is there anybody yawning? Who's doing most of the talking, right? We want the mic, as I call it, to be shared around the room, not just one person, talking over others and saying their piece whilst others are not. So those are the 5 ones. And now, do we have time? Are we okay, Tom, for me to spend a few more minutes on the second experiment?
Yeah, should we go to, how long will it be, Mohammed? 5 minutes? Can you get to in 5?
I'd say 5 minutes and then a quick round of feedback and then we can end there.
Yeah, let's go 5 then.
Okay, lovely. Thank you all for your patience. So the gratitude pillar was the second experiment I ran. What were the circumstances? This was when I was working with a team where there was a major upgrade of the underlying database going on in the entire organization. And Oracle had come along and said, look, we are not going to accept any possible changes going into the system until this upgrade is completed. And we were paying them, I don't know, millions of pounds to do that upgrade and all of that fun stuff. So the team was blocked from releasing any software. And this was a team that could deliver software on a daily basis, but they absolutely delivered software on a sprintly basis. So they started feeling, why should we work so hard when we're not allowed to deliver any of our software for the next 6 months? What's the point? We may as well not come to work. And that's exactly how they felt. They felt that we can do this quite safely, but the leadership does not trust us. That's how they felt. Was that true? Not necessarily. But you see, there were other things going on in the background for the leadership team that was making those decisions, because there was a lot of money at stake, and we were working with a company like Oracle who had basically put their foot down and said, you make a change, we don't take any responsibility then. So it wasn't really about that, but they essentially left themselves feeling immensely disappointed. Management don't trust us. We think we can do this safely. Where was their focus? Their focus was essentially what they couldn't do. They couldn't release software. Their focus was on leadership, not trusting them. All the sort of negative connotations of where their focus was going. So what did I do? And this is an example of an informal practice. The previous experiment was a formal practice. Here we utilized a retrospective. We needed a room, we needed the team's willingness, and that's it. All I did was ask them, in the full retrospective for an hour, write down each of you 5 things that you're grateful for. Just that. And they were like, Mo, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. We're not here to be grateful for things. We're here to deliver work. And these were some of the feelings. But they trusted me. They said, look, we'll play along. And then I created a measurement around that. So how will we know that that exercise went well? We'll ask and receive feedback and see what people say. And I will observe and notice the pulse in the team after the experiment has completed. So notice the words observe there again. Let me give you an example of what they said, or rather what they wrote. Some wrote, I'm grateful for my parents. How often do we acknowledge our lovely parents if they're still with us? Another one said, I'm grateful that I have a team I can work in. How many of us would die to have a job right now? Die to be a part of a team and earn money? Another one said, I love fried chicken wings, right? And this is a guy that bought chicken wings every Friday at lunchtime. And he brought 30 wings for the team and he ate him, he loved them. I'm grateful I have a job. I'm grateful for my life, my health. I'm here, I'm breathing, I'm living, right? How often are we grateful? Or are we just stuck in the rat race of the 9 to 5 and the children and the blah, 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 right? Now, where focus goes, energy flows. In the previous slide, their focus was on the negativity. On this particular slide, their focus is more on the what we have. It's the mindset of abundance rather than the mindset of lack. Keep that in mind, okay? So what happened? At first, it was weird for everyone. And they thought, it's just another one of those retrospective formats, but let's just give it a shot. It got very emotional. One team member actually ended up in tears because they felt an immense joy through that exercise, and it connected them with what was most important. All the team members after that session, they literally came back and gave me a hug. And they said, I don't even know why we were so disappointed. Thank you for this exercise, because we truly now know what gratefulness means. And we don't care whether we release software or not. We're here to work and we'll deliver and we'll release when we can. No big deal, right? Can you see the shift in mindset? 1 hour, 1 retrospective, 1 question, simple. So gratitude is an antidote to negativity. Remember, fear, negativity cannot exist for as long as you're grateful. It's literally the opposite side of the seesaw. So if at any stage you guys feel slightly annoyed or negative emotions are coming up or you're beginning to worry, just home in and ground yourself on 1 or 2 things that you are grateful for in that day. And it could be as simple as this. I am still living and I can breathe. Could be as simple as that. Okay. So in conclusion, mindfulness is just not another item you're going to add to your to-do list. Although it's always good to do the formal practices as well as the informal practices, it's just a gentle invitation to a new state of being that we can all embody. Mindfulness is an invitation for us to be curious. Curiosity invites openness, and openness welcomes new and creative ways of existing amidst what appears to be a regular, redundant, and mundane environment. And Alan Watts, he says, the real secret of life is to be completely engaged with what you're doing in the here and in the now. A bit like how all of you have done in this session, you are in the here and in the now. And instead of calling it work, realize that it's nothing but play. So with that, I'd like to end here and thank you all for your dedicated attention, your questions, your insights. And I can hand over back to Tom.